So without further ado, I'll bring up Rob Smith.
Thank you.
So I talked to Rob beforehand about maybe letting him give his own biography, because I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to do it any justice. So.
Yeah, so here I am. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for having me. I really appreciate having the platform and the opportunity to talk about my book, but also talk about all the issues that we're going to discuss that are about it. So my name is Rob Smith. I'm, among other things, the author of Confessions of a Don't Ask, Don't Tell Soldier, How a Black Gay Man Survived the Infantry Coming Out in the War in Iraq, which is what we're going to be talking a lot about today. I'm also a lot of different things. I'm a black man. I'm a gay man. I'm a veteran. I'm somebody who, Yeah, right.
All right, yeah, that's all right.
And there's not, and it's really interesting that that I got that shout out, because I work in media right now, so I'm kind of like an activist turned journalist. So I'm a journalist at Yahoo Finance right now, and there are a lot of these identities that I inhabit are very underrepresented in media today, and in tech. So it feels good to get that shout out as a veteran. So yeah, I'm the author of this book. I'm a black man, I'm a gay man, I'm a veteran, I'm a lot of different things, and I won't bore you with going through the form bio, but that's all on the website, robsmithonline.com, and you can find it on the Twitter bio and all that, so I hope you guys look me up and follow me and all that other stuff. So.
Yeah, and actually, while we're at it, I should say there are copies of Rob's book available in the back for $10. Getting a nod, cool. So if you are interested, they are available in the back, and we will also have time for questions at the end. Mm-hmm. So friendly reminder up front, and I'll repeat it again, that when you do have a question, don't just shout it out. Line up behind the mics so that we can get it on the recording.
Yeah, and I'll be around to sign any copies that are purchased today as well.
Cool. Yesterday was International Coming Out Day, mm-hmm. and there's a really interesting excerpt in your book from when you came out to your mom, and I thought, given that International Coming Out Day was yesterday, that might be an appropriate place to start if you don't mind reading it out.
I don't mind reading at all, so while we're here. Yesterday was Coming Out Day, and did a lot of tweeting, usually do talks on Coming Out Day. To me, Coming Out Day is about being represented in all of your identities everywhere you are. I don't have to come out as a black man all the time. This is the first thing that people see when they see me. But I am, kind of put in the position to come out as a gay man over and over and over again, and you pick and choose the different ways that you want to come out. Now, this excerpt that I'm going to read right now is me coming out over the phone to my mother when I was very young, and when I was just starting out in the military. It did not go well, and I'll just read this little bit for you. I opened the door to the barracks room slowly and discreetly and picked up the phone to dial my mother. I wasn't sure why I felt the need to provide a teaser to a conversation that we wouldn't be having for 2 months, but a strong sense of relief had come over me ever since I admitted it to myself. I'm gay. I like guys. I heard her warm yet gravelly voice on the other end. She'd obviously been smoking. Hello? She said. Hey, Mom, it's me. How you doing? Fine, and you? I'm okay. What are you up to? Just driving, Robert. What's up? Nothing. I felt my throat begin to close up. I suddenly became tense and nervous, and I was struggling to find the words to say. So why are you calling me, Robert? I'm on the road driving. Husband number 3 lived in North Carolina. He worked for a truck driving company that delivered loads of various products all across the country. She'd moved down my senior year of high school and embarked on a career in driving, leaving me to live with paternal grandparents for the remainder of my time. Okay. You know I'm coming back home for Christmas, right? Yes, Robert, I know. Well, there's something I wanted to talk to you about. There was a long, uncomfortable stream of absolute silence. I could hear the wind whipping in the background from the cracked window of her 18-wheeler. I wondered what city she was driving to this time, what the scenery was like wherever she was, anything to fill the silence. After what seemed like forever, she continued. What is it? You're not gay, are you? The words hit me like a well-timed punch to the gut. My knees buckled a little bit, and I stumbled onto the corner of my bed, shocked. Well, what if I was? I said in a quiet little boy voice. Robert, you know that's not allowed in the Army, she said. You also know that's not God's plan. Her voice was cold and harsh, unforgiving. Whatever the words to respond to this were, I couldn't find them. Do you hear me? She said. I felt like I was adrift, like I was floating above myself watching this happen. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was supposed to call and give her a primer that I wanted to talk to her about something, so that maybe it wouldn't be such a big shock when I told her during the holiday. When I did tell her after Christmas dinner, she would hug me and tell me that she loved me and that I was her son no matter what. I would hug her back as tears of joy streamed down my cheeks while flurries of perfectly soft white snow fell outside. That was how it was supposed to happen, but it wasn't. It was happening right now, and I wasn't exactly feeling the love. Yes, I hear you, I said in a low, defeated croak. And you better not tell anybody else either. You hear me, boy? Those people there are not to be trusted, and you can't be getting kicked out. How are you going to pay for college if you get kicked out? Where are you going to live? I don't know, Mom. I know you don't. Is that what you called me about? I got to get back to driving. Call me next week. She hung up, and I sat on the edge of the bed motionless. Soon after, I realized I was crying. Out in the distance, I could hear the faint chant of soldiers calling cadence while they ran. Their voices comforted me. When I heard them, it was almost as if I wasn't so alone. And it was only when they stopped that I knew I was.
Thank you for reading that. I think it's actually kind of funny because I feel my own heart rate rising as I hearing you read it, because I think there's a lot of similarities between a lot of coming out experiences, and clearly I could see that you were transported back there a little bit as you read it. And, I appreciate you sharing that with us. One thing I wanted to ask you about is the very end of that passage where you talk about hearing the soldiers calling cadence in the background and feeling comforted, but then feeling very, very alone. And I wanted to ask you, I think that points to something that kind of runs throughout the book of the Army being a source of community and a source of comfort in a lot of circumstances, but also in some ways, because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, exacerbating your loneliness at the same time. Was it both of those things? Was it really more one of those things than the other? What was that juxtaposition like for you?
You know, I think it was both of those things. I think that when I talk about the military, and when you read the book, you'll find out. You know, a lot of people think that just writing this book that I'm here to bash the military or bash being a vet or anything, because they actually had that discriminatory policy for so long, and that's not what I do. I think things are more they're more shades of gray. It's not a total black and white thing. When I was in the military, I did feel completely isolated from other people purely because of my sexual orientation, because I knew what it was, and because I also knew that I could get kicked out of the military at any point. And when I talk about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and when I talk about serving under that, I think it's really important for people to realize that what happens when you get kicked out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell is that you get a dishonorable discharge. That means college benefits gone, healthcare benefits gone, all of these things that have made my life so much better as a veteran who did get an honorable discharge would get taken away. And I think that really connects to a lot of the battles that we're having right now as an LGBTQ community about equal workplace protections, conversations that we're having with trans people being able to be open and out about their identities at work right now. So I felt very alone, very isolated because of this, but at the same time, I had a lot of good relationships with people that I served with. I had a lot of good times. I felt a lot of camaraderie. I felt a brotherhood. And I only say brotherhood because the infantry was all male. So that was a combat position that wasn't open to women at the time. So I really did feel all that. But at the same time, having to serve under Don't Ask, Don't Tell made it that much more difficult. I felt like I couldn't be my entire self. We have these conversations about bringing our entire selves to the workplace when we are LGBTQ or we are Latino or African American or any of these other different identities. And I felt like I couldn't bring my entire identity to that workplace.
Do you think that inhibited your ability as a soldier in any way?
Absolutely. Because, you know, serving in the military depends on you bringing 100% of yourself to the job. I was a good soldier. I was an okay soldier. I felt when looking back at it, I feel like if I was able to be out, I could have been a great soldier. I could have been an amazing soldier because I wouldn't have had to have that barrier that's there, that had to be there to keep me from everywhere else. I feel like right now in the position that I'm in, whether it's reporting at Yahoo Finance, whether it's doing talks and things like that, I'm able to bring my entire self to work. And even though that may not be the most comfortable thing at all times for other people, it's more comfortable for me because I feel like I don't have anything to hide. I don't have to hide the fact that I just got married a month ago. I don't have to, watch my Thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't have. You guys will applaud if you guys see his cape. Follow me on Instagram. It's like his cape was amazing. But I don't have to pick and choose my pronouns when I'm talking about the person that's in my life. I can say this is my husband and this is what's going on. And at that point in time, yes, it did make me feel completely separated from everyone else because I couldn't be open about who I really was.
Okay. This might get into a question I was going to ask you after your next reading, actually. But are there any ways that you felt that as a gay man you could actually be a better soldier, or you brought something more to the table than maybe your straight brothers in arms did?
It's so funny because I've never gotten that question before. And so I really have to think about it. And now that I'm thinking about that question, I think the only thing that I can say as somebody who is gay or somebody who is a person of color, I think that there's an empathy that comes in seeing the world from other people's eyes. And when I get into the chapters about Iraq in the book, and I have a reading from Iraq coming up a little bit later, I think that I was able to empathize with the plight of the people that were there, maybe more so than some of the other soldiers who were straight white dudes. And there's nothing wrong with straight white dudes. Okay? There's nothing wrong with straight white dudes. It's just that it's more intrinsic to me as a gay man, as a black man, to be able to see the world through the lens of somebody who is not like most other people that I'll come into contact with.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Do I think that being gay would help me do my job any more or less than anybody else? I don't really think so.
Yeah.
I was a pretty good shot. I was a great shot.
That makes one of us.
Yeah. better than a lot of the straight people, actually. Funny enough.
And you don't think that had anything to do with your sexual orientation?
I don't. It could be.
You never know, right?
Well, now that we can be out in the military now, somebody needs to commission this study, and we need to see gays and lesbians and trans soldiers. We need to see how they're shot compared to straight ones. And maybe it can be an argument for LGBTQ recruitment.
Hey, we'll take whatever we can get, right? Well, and actually, what I was thinking of, and I think it's related to your empathy point and about putting yourself in someone's shoes, is kind of code switching and the ability that a lot of LGBT folks have to do that. And I think that's related to your next excerpt, which is, it's a really entertaining part of the book where you talk about your first experience at a gay club.
Yeah, the first gay club.
And I think there's some points in there about code switching as well. So
Absolutely.
Do you mind sharing?
Yeah. And this is, technically it's my second gay club. My first one was in Ohio when I was 17 years old, and we won't throw that place out there. I think they're still around.
Don't want to get anyone in trouble.
No, not at all. So, I found myself in my barracks room later that night once again in front of the computer, but this time it wasn't for online sex. Sergeant Norman, as creepy and terrifying as he was to me, had provided an opportunity that I'd never really been aware of until now. I typed hide and seek Colorado Springs into the Google search bar and anxiously clicked on the website. After I winced at the choppy yellow and black flash animation that opened the site, I looked at the information. Hide and Seek, as I was informed via the text on the website, was Colorado Springs' hippest gay and straight inclusive bar. It was open on the weekends until 5 a.m. It was 21 plus until 2 a.m. and 18 plus afterwards. I cringed at having to wait until 2 a.m. to get in, but I knew exactly what I was going to be doing this weekend. I'd only been to one other gay club in my life. It was a small hole in the wall called Club X in Sandusky, Ohio. I'd spent the summer after high school graduation working in an amusement park and truly exploring what quote-unquote gay meant for the first time, at least on the dance floor. The first time I entered, it was like sensory overload. It was the darkest place I'd ever been to in my life, lit only by a strobe disco ball and the lights of the bar. I looked to my right and saw boys dancing with boys and girls dancing with girls for the first time in my life. Their bodies dripped with sweat and glitter, sparkling as the glitter bounced from the strobe lights. There were many nights that summer I spent twirling, being free on the dance floor. I was twirling before Kenya Moore, by the way. A couple people got that. I thought back to those nights as I made the decision to go to hide and seek just to check it out. The night I was to make my initial trip to the gay bar, I paced around the small barracks room in anticipation. It had been a while since my nights at the gay bar in Ohio. I modeled my clothing choices after the men on Queer as Folk, which I still watch religiously every week, fully absorbing the show's ideas about gay life. Oh, God. I walked into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I wore a black A-shirt, chosen to show off the muscles I'd gained from the days spent working out in Kuwait, and a skin-tight pair of leather pants I'd bought from a discount store a few days earlier. I don't usually read this section a lot, so I'm finding it quite entertaining right now, actually. There were a lot of men in the club scenes on Queer as Folk that wore leather clothes, so I figured that was a popular look. As I pranced back and forth in front of the mirror while keeping an eagle eye on the clock, I imagined what it would be like to walk into the gay club. Would men want me? Would I be desired? I thought so, and it made me even more excited to make the trip. I put on a large coat and walked out of the barracks room into my car. I instinctively looked around to make sure nobody noticed me, got in the car, and pulled out as silently as possible. In my hand, I held directions that I'd printed out, and I was surprised to see that the club was only a 15-minute drive from the base. When I pulled up to it, I was struck at how ordinary it looked. It was a small building offset by two outside patios on both sides. An ancient awning hung over the entrance decks. Several men hung out lazily on the old patio furniture that decorated the decks. I summoned my energy and exited the car, the brisk wind stimulating goose flesh on my bare arms. I put my chin up, my shoulders back, and walked to the end of the line where other patrons waited to get in. Frightened but aware, I continued to look around and behind me for any sign that someone had recognized me as a soldier. I thought back to the decal on my car that was used for entry into Fort Carson. Did anybody see me get out of the car? Would anyone here be able to recognize the decal and turn me in? I tried not to let the thoughts get the better of me. I did my best to hide my anxiety while I waited in line. I decided that I wouldn't look back to the car so that even if someone recognized the decal, they wouldn't be able to see that I was the one who owned the car. I studied the guys in line in front of me. They were young, thin, and overwhelmingly white. My presence commanded attention from some of them. I was greeted by a dismissive look up and down and a shoulder turned back to the front. I looked at my watch and noticed that it was 2 a.m. on the dot. Finally. After waiting in line for what seemed like an eternity, I noticed it began to move. The line behind me had grown. I was far too nervous to look anyone in the eye, so I glanced back, taking in only shoulders, tight jeans, and scuffed-up shoes. After moving through the line, I entered the club and into a different world. Making my way through the hallway, I noticed more guys who were around my age. The place was filled with the stench of old beer. My shoes stuck to the floor as I walked down the narrow staircase. I could see ancient messages written on the wall. Johnny G sucks cock. Alan P takes it raw. There was something exciting, sleazy, and dangerous not only about the messages, but about where I was. I was scared as hell, but secretly thrilled to be breaking the rules just by being here. As I walked deeper into the labyrinth of the dark club, I found myself further away from all the stresses that dominated my life at the base. Sergeant Norman's harassment, the constant fear and worry that someone would figure out my sexual orientation, and the new promise and threat of war were all relegated to a place far away as I explored this dark and mysterious new world of hide and seek.
First of all, what a great name for a gay bar. There should be like a college course on names of gay bars, right? Hide and seek, I really like that one. But part of what I love about that passage is that it speaks to kind of this idea of intersecting identities that you talked about before, and also not just, in terms of you as a black man or as a member of the army or as a gay man, but even within the gay community, right? There's all these different kind of boxes we put each other in and stuff. And there's this feeling, I think among a lot of people, that like you come out and then you're just accepted into the gay community. And, you've got all the right cards, you watch Queer as Folk, you're good to go. And what's cool about that passage is that it speaks to how that's not always the case, right? I talked about the boxes we put ourselves into, right? Twinks, bears, whatever. Twinks judging you in the line. You don't want to be associated with the bear on the dance floor, right? So I was wondering if you could speak more about, after you came out, what your experience of being accepted or not accepted into the LGBT community was like.
Well, I'll tell you this. You made a really good point. And I give a lot of talks on college campuses, like all across the country, and a lot of, and these are younger, kids, 18 to 22. And some people are out, some people are not out. And I think that, like you said, there's this idea that, wow, we're all gay, or we're all LGBTQ, and we're going to be in this big community, and there's just nothing but love and acceptance, and it's going to be great. And that is just not the case, unfortunately. I think my experience coming out is definitely kind of like relegated to Colorado and where I was living at the time. It was not easy, even when I came out, and this is even post-military, because you come out and you think that you have all this stuff in common with people because, specifically talking about being gay, we're all gay, and then you realize, those are the white guys and they don't really want to talk to the black guys, or this is this group and you have to be in this group or you have to be in that group. And I have to say that this book, I lived these stories in the early 2000s. And the more things have changed, the more they've kind of stayed the same. Case in point, we look at the images that we have of LGBTQ people in the media. And still to this day, they tend to be primarily images of white gay men. And this is something that's starting to change, and I'm glad that this is changing. But even to this day, I do an Instagram account with my husband at Rob and Misha. And sometimes we get liked and we get commented by a lot of these other blogs that are like cutest gay couples or gay couples, blah, 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 whatever. So I look at these Instagram feeds and they are completely dominated by white gay male couples. And this is Instagram we're talking about, like this is 2017 going on 2018. And there are a lot of different things in the community that can divide us, from race to socioeconomic status to all those different things. And I've definitely experienced my fair share of racism in the LGBTQ community. I've experienced my fair share of classism. These are things that are definitely happening and definitely still going on. But the good thing about now, where we're sitting right here and talking about this in 2017, is I think that we are now starting to talk about these things more. And when you speak about them more and you speak to them, I think that it allows us and it gives us the tools to try to change some of these things. So if I say on Twitter, or I write an article about why are so many heads of LGBTQ organizations white, people will talk about that. And people say, why is this? And when, transgender women and men speak up and say, we need to be represented, and why are all these trans women white? And then we have people like Laverne Cox and Janet Mock come out and then kind of like change that conversation around what the face of transgender is. And I think that for me, in writing this book and making the very specific choice to put my image on the cover, is saying that this is a book about a black gay man, and I'm going to put my face on the cover. Because, back in the day when I was talking to publishers and things about that, one thing about the publishing industry is that you will be told in not uncertain terms that sometimes putting a black face on the cover is not going to sell. And
really?
Yeah, absolutely. Huh. And even doing things that are LGBT oriented, putting a black face on the cover is not going to sell. So it's very important for me to represent myself and other black gay men, I think, by putting myself on the cover. So yeah.
We should see if we can prove them wrong by buying a lot of gay books
we should.
with a black person on the cover.
Absolutely. But there should be more. And, and a point to that is that still to this day, we are going on, 15 years after the war in Iraq. This is still one of, I believe, less than 5 books that have been written by African-American soldiers of any sexual orientation or gender identity about their experiences in Iraq. So in writing this book and in doing this, and I like to bill it as Moonlight meets American Sniper. So the question is, why, when we look at these books that are about the military, when we watch these movies, when we watch these miniseries, why are they always about straight white men? When the military is one of the most diverse organizations you'll ever work in your life, I've ever worked in. It's still the only place in my entire career, and I've done a lot of things where I've had a black boss. It's still the only place I've ever had a black boss. So I really wanted to make sure that that was represented.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about how you lived these in the early 2000s and now it's 2017 and things have changed, but they're still the same.
Yeah.
I'm a little embarrassed to admit this. One of the first things that came to my mind was Will and Grace.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was really popular back then, and it's now back. God help us.
Yeah.
And it's always been kind of controversial, specifically because it paints a very specific white, affluent, urban picture of what gay life is like.
It does. And and I think the reason why is because, and this speaks to having people of color that are actually writing and having people of color that are actually creating. Because the first bit of advice that people give you as a writer is that they say, write what you know. And if we have a lot of people that are in positions of power that are even putting out gay or LGBTQ content that are white guys, the first thing they're going to write is what they know. What they know is upper middle class white gay guys living in large cities. And that's great because God knows there's a lot of them.
Right.
But there's also a lot of different people having a lot of different experiences. And the most exciting thing now is I'm having a meeting with some agents in a couple of weeks because I'm really trying to push getting this adapted for the big screen or Netflix or something like that. I think that the most exciting thing right now is that there's so many platforms out there. So, not only do we have the legacy networks, but we have the Hulus and the Netflixes and the Facebooks and all that stuff. And there's so much more opportunity to get different stories that represent marginalized communities out there. And if you have a movie like Moonlight that just won an Academy Award for Best Picture, that means that somewhere out there, there are people that are open and receptive to these stories. Yeah. And I think that now is the time for that. Even though the new Will and Grace is still pretty funny.
Is it? I haven't seen it.
It's okay.
I wasn't a fan of the original. I gave myself away earlier. I wasn't really a fan of the original.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's
yeah.
Cool. And one other question I have about this idea of acceptance in the LGBT community is, what about as a veteran specifically? Do you feel that you are viewed differently, for better or worse, as a veteran in the gay community, or does it not come up at all?
It doesn't come up in the gay community. I can talk to being a veteran in the overall community.
Sure.
And what I'll say about being a veteran just in the community in general is that people don't understand. People don't understand being a veteran. People don't respect being a veteran. People think that military service is strange and odd. These are things that I've dealt with in a lot of different workplace situations I've been in. When you have an all-volunteer military that adds up to, I think, maybe 1 to 3% of America's population, and this is specifically talking about America, then chances are that the vast majority of people don't know anybody who served, have never met anybody who served, don't have anybody in their family who served, so they have no idea. And so the idea is that these are just, this is poor people are just cannon fodder for America.
Yeah.
And that's some of the feedback that I've gotten. And this is stuff that comes from, wealthy liberals on the coast. And these are some of the ideas that people carry with them before they find out that I'm a veteran. And then I make things very awkward for them, when they bring this stuff up. And then
Sure.
people talk about things like the military-industrial complex and all that. And those are valid arguments. Those are valid things to talk about. And even in the LGBTQ community, I think that speaking about veterans' issues and speaking positively of the military is seen as somehow conservative or right-leaning, which I've never understood. But I've gotten that feedback within our community as well. And I've never quite understood that, because for me, the military was the way to expand my life and my borders beyond the small town that I was raised in Ohio, the small city, Akron, Ohio.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that we have a lot of work to do, both as an LGBTQ community and as a mainstream American community in general. We have a lot of work to do when it comes to understanding veterans, and also people that are in hiring positions in organizations. Instead of the first thing that you think about when you talk to a veteran is about PTSD or how horrible war must be or anything like that. Like, think about what this person may be able to bring to this organization. What are the qualities that the military instills in people that could help in your organization? I will tell you that for me personally, it just gave me a higher level of discipline than a lot of people that I work with in a lot of different situations.
Yeah. It's interesting. You brought up a really good point that I think is a little underappreciated, which is not only is the all-volunteer force so small that just numbers say few people are going to have interactions with it, but it's also disproportionately Southern, lower on the socioeconomic ladder.
Lower middle class, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, a lot of these, I think you use the term wealthy coastal liberal or something like that, are especially removed from it in a way. So
very much removed from it.
In the interest of kind of spreading a little bit more about what the experience of being in Iraq is actually like, that is as good a segue as any into the last passage.
It is, and I will keep this brief because I know we wanted to open it up for questions. So this is, here we go, and this is very short. So this is basically, I served for slightly under a year right after the initial invasion. My platoon, or actually my entire company, convoyed into Iraq. So we drove from Kuwait into Iraq, and we kind of made little pit stops along the way. And this is, describing that. When we crossed the border into Iraq just a few hours later, I noticed an immediate difference in the scenery. The streets of Iraq had a look of war-strewn desperation to them that was hard to stomach. Everywhere I looked, I saw Arabic language that I couldn't understand. The roadsides were littered with abandoned fighter vehicles that the Saddam loyalists had used in their futile attempts to defend themselves against the American invaders. Small, brown Iraqi children would come out of nowhere sometimes, running and waving with the tanks. We were moving slow enough in the 15 to 20 vehicle convoy for them to keep up with to a point. They wore tattered pants and T-shirts with logos and brands from them that were distinctly from the 80s. Their high voices were filled with joy and hope as they chanted, "America, USA," with bright smiles and hands extended in the thumbs-up position. Many times they were alone, but sometimes older, hardened Iraqi men who looked at us with contempt and distrust joined them. I smiled and waved at the children. They were ignorant of the fact that I was doing so with the semi-automatic weapon positioned directly in front of me. When I saw the faces of the adult men, I gripped my weapon just a little bit tighter. I pressed the butt of my weapon deeper into my shoulder in case any unforeseen events required me to have it in position immediately. I would look each man in his eyes above the heads of the small, simple children they were protecting. I matched the contempt in their eyes with steely resolve in mine. They needed to know that I wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger in case they wanted to try anything. I found myself locking eyes with most of them until we were safely out of view. I wondered what they thought of us, American infidels who'd come to violently overthrow the regime. I saw a lot of children and a lot of angry Iraqi men during those days on the convoy. I thought a lot about how I would feel if the situation was reversed. What if my country had been bombed into submission for reasons that were still murky? What was it about America that determined that we were always right in using force? If we were to listen to what was told to us by the government and our leaders, Saddam Hussein was a bloodthirsty tyrant. He was out to unleash weapons of mass destruction onto an unsuspecting American public. I just couldn't allow myself to be convinced. Were the 9/11 attackers not based in Afghanistan? The shift from talking about Afghanistan to focusing on Iraq was so swift and smooth I didn't even realize it happened. All I knew was that after returning from the first 6-month deployment in Kuwait, All talk had suddenly shifted to a rock. I wanted to trust what was being told to us, but the questions in my head wouldn't allow me to do so fully. Was blind trust a prerequisite to serving the country, or does it just make it easier to do the job?
So I'll just ask you one question about this because I do want to open it up for audience questions as well. But I think what you see here is your point that you made earlier about empathy kind of made explicit, right? As you imagine what it's like to be those children or those angry men. And it's related to this question of the doubt that you felt and whether that doubt was an impediment to you serving. So I guess that's my question for you is if you could say more about whether you did feel that to some extent that empathy was a blocker for you and something that made this much more difficult.
It was. You know, like I said in that segment, or in that reading, there was a lot of misinformation that was going on around that time. I mean, now we can look back on it and we can say, we know what it was about, and it wasn't necessarily about the fear that Saddam Hussein had WMDs. And there was a lot of doubt, a lot of fear, a lot of conversations going on between me and other soldiers, and I get into that a little bit in the book. But there's a lot of talk about exactly why are we here. There's a lot of rumors about, Saddam's going to be over and they're going to love us and we're just going to be out of here in a couple of months, and that didn't happen.
Right.
It's quite obvious that didn't happen. But I do think that being an other in the military, being a black person in the military, and I deal with some of the racial issues more explicitly earlier on when I talk about basic training, because when I was in basic training in the South, I was the only black person in the entire company. But I think that when you're there and you're dealing with a lot of, let me tell you something, you're dealing with a lot of good old boys. And you're dealing in a lot of situations where sometimes you are one of the only black people around, and you will kind of understand and get a kind of an inside view of how people treat others. I talk a little bit about in the book about how they used to call the Iraqi people like Haji. Oh, Haji better not, mess up, or Haji better not do this because, we'll put a bullet in him, all that other stuff. And just as a black person, as a black man, some of the conversations and some of the behaviors just felt to me intrinsically wrong. And I get into that a little bit, but I do feel like I had more empathy going in that situation just as a person of color, and I will identify myself as a person of color in that instance because that's something that I shared in common with them, the Iraqi people. Like, we were both people of color. And when you look at the military, it was these overwhelmingly white male forces that were coming in to kind of dominate that situation. So I think that it did help me look at it through a lens that was a lot different, which brings it back to why I felt it was so important to put this out, because the lens of taking the gay out of it, the lens of the military, a view of the military through the lens of a black man is not something that exists enough. So. Yeah.
All right, I have a ton of follow-up questions and stuff about my own personal experience that we'll talk about afterwards. But sure. I do want to make sure that everyone has time to ask questions, and we're at a quarter till. So reminder, if you do have questions, please line up behind the mics, and we'll open it up. I think you're the only one right now.
Right to the front?
Yeah. Yes. I'm so glad somebody had a question because it's so awkward when people don't.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
So my question is, it comes out of the first reading that you had from your book, when you had talked about coming out to your mother on the phone. And you had made mention to her quoting how it wasn't part of God's plan. And I often hear about people using religion kind of as a stick to beat back what's uncomfortable or strange to them. And I'm wondering, it sounds like you come from a household that had a good deal of faith, or at least that was part of the culture. And I was wondering if you could talk about your experiences coming out to those with kind of a faith upbringing and in that community. And then on top of that, if you yourself have found a faith group that is accepting to you since.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I did grow up in a Christian household, African Methodist Episcopal to be specific, and I know a lot of people, particularly black gay men, who were born and raised in the church and who were born and raised in homophobic churches. And when you internalize those messages when you're very young, they can be very, very hard to overcome. And I've spoken to people that have had that experience in their churches. For me, I didn't have that experience in my church growing up. I never heard anything either way about anything gay in my church. It was just never about that. And so I feel like I'm able to have a relationship with God right now, but it doesn't have that baggage on it, where I had to like come back and realize that, oh, all of these things that were being told to me about being gay or homosexuality or whatever were wrong, and they were a perversion of what the Bible is saying and all that stuff. To be more specific about a faith community that I found, I'm more spiritual than overtly religious at this point. At my wedding, I have a friend that's a choir master at a church on the Upper East Side. He semi-officiated my ceremony. We jumped the broom, and everybody everybody knows the slave tradition of jumping the broom and all that stuff. They jumped the broom because they weren't able to be married, and so I did that at my wedding. And I have a kind of mentor that is a black gay pastor at a affirming church on the Upper West Side. So that's what my relationship is to faith and Christianity right now. And I know that some people in the community hate it. They hate anything that has to do with faith because there's so many people who use faith and who use Christianity and who use these things, and they pervert those messages in order to ostracize people that are gay and people in the LGBTQ community. And I understand why people are so hesitant to embrace it. I've never really had that experience. And my mother brought that up. And by the way, we're on very good terms now. These things happened a while ago. So we were able to kind of come back around. And I said, look, parents are people too. And coming out isn't always an after-school special. Mine certainly wasn't. But she was going through a lot at the time. She got cancer twice. And she was in a point in her life where she was very religious, and that's where that was coming from. So I would say that my relationship with Christianity right now is fairly strong.
Thank you for the question.
Sure. You. Who was first? Oh, okay.
Why don't you go ahead? We'll mic to mic.
And then you.
So thank you so much for coming here, and I really appreciate you speaking out about your experiences. My question is about the people you serve with. Do you have an ongoing relationship with a lot of the people that you served with when you weren't out? And did you have to kind of come out to them? And how did that go?
Yeah, well, I will say Facebook is a powerful tool. That might get edited out. No, Facebook is a really powerful tool to just connect with people. And I'm Facebook friends with people that I served, and we're in open dialogue. As a matter of fact, somebody just commented on a post that I made about this the other day, and he asked me if he was in the book, and I said, yeah, you're right there. Of course, your name has been changed, because I changed everybody else's name but mine. So I do still have those relationships with them. And the reactions when I came out, and I got into a lot of heavy activist work when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still the law of the land. I was arrested at the White House protesting Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And then when a lot of that stuff was happening, they would kind of hit me up via social media and all that. And it ranged from, we kind of figured you were gay, but nobody really cared, to, oh, this is a big surprise, but it doesn't make a difference to me because, you were still Smitty. You're still Smitty, you're still a soldier, stuff like that. So I do have those relationships still to this day. And I guess the worst part about it is that I know that those relationships could have been stronger. But it was just with that law, it just wasn't good timing.
Thank you.
Sure. And you had one?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Kelsey. I just wanted to thank you so much for being here and for serving our country and for sharing your story. You kind of stole my question, so I'm going to restore mine a little bit. That's okay. So you spoke about how it was really hard for you to come out to your mom, and you couldn't obviously come out when you were in the military. So who did you confide in during that time, and how did you cope with the mental health aspect of it? Because I know when you're hiding who you are, sometimes it brings depression or anxiety. So how did you cope with that, and who did you confide in?
Right after the first reading I did, I talk about the night that I almost ended my life. And I talked to my sister, who was and remains my best friend, and she kind of talked me off the ledge. So when I was in the military, I confided with her a lot. There are people that I came out to on the sly when I was in the military. But to tell you the truth, at that point in my life, it was a very kind of lonely road. And I'm really glad that you brought up the conversation about mental health. I speak out about an organization called the Soldiers Project. If nobody knows what the Soldiers Project is, it is an organization. You go to soldiersproject.org. And if you are a veteran or even active duty, I believe, in the armed forces, they have a network of therapists and psychiatrists that work for free. And they will connect you to somebody in your area within 24 to 48 hours. I didn't really start taking control of my mental health and dealing with what I needed to do in that realm till about maybe 5-6 years ago. And I found my therapist through the Soldiers Project. And it has been an immense help for me to work through some of the stuff that is in this book, and also some of the mental health stuff that just comes with being a gay person in this society. You are just not like 87% of other people. And I think that we kid ourselves when we ignore the mental stress that comes along with that. So that was the way. So to answer your question, I wasn't able to start taking care of my mental health till about 6 or 7 years ago, because it was really time to start dealing with some of the issues that this work brings up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to mention the Soldiers Project. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
They give me nothing but free mental health care, by the way.
Thank you so much for coming. Fascinating story, and thank you for your service. One of the things, you're intersectional in so many interesting ways. Soldier, or I guess veteran, gay, black, and I know in my experience as a gay white man, I don't have to. So another aspect of my identity is that I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't reveal much around here.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, are there aspects of your identity that you found easier to expose? Like in your workplace, is it easier to be a veteran or easier to be gay?
I'll tell you. You want to be completely honest? In any workplace, it's not easy to be anything that's not heterosexual and white. Yeah. Let's just keep it all the way real. When I think about my identities and which one is easier to be, I would think that for me, that's a tough one, because to me, it's not about what's easier. It's not about what identity is easier to be. For me, it's about fully inhabiting all of my identities. And I feel like I've done the work to get to this point where I'm comfortable enough with who I am that what other people think of me based on these things don't matter. So, thanks. So I can't take on, oh my God, is everybody gonna think that I'm less capable because I'm black? Or are they gonna think that I shouldn't be on camera because I'm gay? Or are they gonna think I'm crazy because I'm a veteran? I physically can't take those things on, so I have to own all of these identities in any space that I enter into. And look, I'm dealing in finance right now, where I am dealing with majority of people that I deal with are white and straight. And if I kind of carry that baggage from my identities on my back, it would really hinder my ability to do my job and to be effective in my job. I hope that answers the question. So to completely answer the question, there's no one thing that's easier than the other to deal with. I will tell you that as a black man in society, that is the identity that people see. That is how I am treated. People don't know gay and they don't know veteran, but they know black. And that is how I'm treated more so. So that is the kind of discrimination that is more overt to me in my life than anything based on religion or sexuality. Sure.
Hey.
Hey.
So you talked a bit about misconceptions in the broader population about what it means to be in the military, or just lack of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering what you thought or believed about the military before you decided to enlist, and where those ideas came from.
Mm-hmm. I was very young, so I was 17. Yeah, obviously 5 years ago. No, so I was 17. I was very young, and my ideas about the military were, so one of the things this is a story that you're not gonna get from a straight book, is about how I was completely obsessed with my military recruiter. He was just gorgeous. Oh my God. I mean,
They pick them for that reason.
They do. They really do. And there's some embarrassing stuff in there about how my heart just went pitter patter, when he came by. But he was filling my head with a lot of stories about how it'd be just like camping and all that other stuff. So I was getting this idea. I was like, well, the infantry, that'll be cool. And, I get to sleep out and I get to camp and I get to do all this stuff. Mind you, 17 years old. That was not the case. So those ideas of the military did not come to fruition. It was definitely not summer camp. It was not. It was no fairy tale or anything like that. But like I said before, I think that the experiences that I've had just made me stronger. It made me kind of unbreakable. And I wouldn't wish some of the stuff that I went through on anybody, but I do believe that right now, when we have things like when Don't Ask, Don't Tell is over, and the military is trying to come, I guess, into 2017, slowly but surely they'll be here, even though there's still some issues with transgender soldiers that we're still trying to work out nowadays, and nobody knows what's going on with that. But I do think that there are a lot of positive qualities that the military has. There's a lot of positive qualities that it can instill in a lot of people. And I never want to bash the military. I only bash discrimination, discriminatory policies, and discriminatory people.
I feel really bad because I know you're waiting, but I think that has to be our last question because we're about out of time. I really am sorry, but Rob is going to hang out for a while afterwards.
Yeah, I'll hang out, so we'll talk.
So I did want to have one last opportunity to say thank you to Rob. A, for joining us, but B, on a personal note, as a sailor who served both before and after Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal, for your activism and helping to get that policy repealed and everything.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for your service.
So thank you for your service. Thank you again to Rob, and thank you to everyone for coming and for your questions.